Very good afternoon to all the participants, speaker and partakers. I am Neha, and it is a glorious moment to extend my warm wishes on behalf of the Venture Development Center. I want to convey my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Ramesh Loganathan for accepting the invitation and presiding over this seminar on traits of successful entrepreneur. I would like to give you a brief introduction on VDC and eClub. VDC is a startup incubator established by Geetham University in partnership with Northeastern University Boston, aiming to execute some of the tried and tested entrepreneurship programs such as New Ideas Ready Set Go program by highly qualified and seasoned coaches. eClub is a student-run body intended to promote entrepreneurship through various events like speak series, chai chats, workshops, and boot camps, etc. eClub is not only a platform to enhance students' entrepreneurial skill, but also helps them to gain organizational and management skills as well. It also presents student community with great networking opportunities to a large pool of students from various disciplines, mentors, entrepreneurs, government officials, and resource persons. Now I take the honor to introduce our speaker, Professor Ramesh Lognathan. He is Co-Innovation Outreach at IIIT Hyderabad, ex-Chief Innovation Officer of TS State Innovation Cell. Professor Ramesh Lognathan has been adjunct faculty at IIIT Hyderabad since 2002, visiting faculty at IIT Hyderabad, members of Governing Board of Incubators at IIIT Hyderabad, IIT and BITS. Being the center head, he is responsible for leading the product development at the Hyderabad Development Center, built a formidable product engineering group that now owns half of engineering in the company. He was vice president of middleware technologies at Pramati. He is accomplished technologist with over 20 years producing engineering and R&D leadership experience. Recently co-authored a book on SOA approach to integration published by Pegged Publishers. He is also the member of several standards expert groups including J2EE 1.3. Professor Ramesh Loganathan was the chair of ACM Hyderabad Chapter 2012 to 14. Most recently, he was president of Hyderabad Software Industry Association and regional council member at NASCOM, one of the founders of Head Start Network. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Ramesh Loganathan to our digital speaker series at Geetham. Sir, we have curated couples of questions requested by the audience which we would relish to discuss at the last of the session. Sir, kindly address the gathering.
Certainly happy to be back and waiting for the pandemic to get over so I can visit the campus sometime. It's been almost 2 years since I was last at
Yeah.
so
Thank
nice.
you. Thank you. And just to add on to the crowd, Ramesh was very instrumental when we started our MBA FinTech. And he was very instrumental when setting up the AP FinTech Valley as well, which is our neighboring Rishikonda. So over to you, Ramesh.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to be talking about, let me just share the screen. So I'm going to be talking about more the, like what makes a good startup rather than like what makes a good entrepreneur. We'll touch upon that a little bit at the end, but the focus is going to be on what makes a good startup rather than, right? So, I try to do this in about 30 minutes or so. I want to have a good discussion. Let me see if I can just set the context quickly, and then we'll look forward to those questions. So, I mean, we know that like the whole country, and of course, I'm in Hyderabad, so I know Hyderabad very well. We are very rapidly as a startup ecosystem, we are quite rapidly evolving, right? So it's like, I mean, there are big centers now. Bangalore is a big hub. Mumbai, Chennai, Delhi, Hyderabad, right, and even Pune, little bit in Vizag also. And so there are a lot of startups coming up, and I think it's become really mainstream compared to what it was 5-10 years back. Today, I think almost every family knows what a startup means, right? Which was not the case 10 years back, probably not even 5 years back. Now, with that, even as more and more startups are coming up, and like a few unicorns, we already have about 13 or so unicorns from India now at the last count. And still, the number of startups, right, are really, really small. Number of good startups, look at the number of unicorns in the world. And India's tiny compared to like unicorns elsewhere. For a country like us, which is so large, and with 1/6 of the world population, and a country that leads the technology development in the world, a country with like lots of Indians in the Bay Area that have started startups, that have grown very large companies and run very, very large companies today, right? Not just, 10, 15, 20 years back, we were only in the technology roles, right? You used to find in Bay Area, even back in the 90s when I was living there, we used to see companies where like the heads of engineering or senior VP of engineering and such are Indians. But today, like there are many companies where the CEOs are Indians, many companies that have founded startups, lots of startups. And many of the startups have gone on to do very, very well. Many, many unicorns started by Indians. So if Indians in Bay Area can do it, why not Indians in India? Right? Our fundamental experience is not too different. If you look at people that have started startups there and similar profile here, they're very similar. Go to similar education institutions, work for similar countries. Even the ones in India, these days are quite well traveled. They've worked several years in other countries, very globally aware. And so fundamentally, as an individual, background and experience, where they're not too different. Like there are people working for Intel in India, there are people working for Intel in the US, but amongst Indians in Intel, many of them have started startups, but amongst Indians in Intel, not many have started startups, like same with many companies. So when the background experience is very similar, somehow, right, the startups not happening. Now, why is it so low? I mean, like we know that the numbers are very low. So one, there are many reasons. The ecosystem has to evolve, the support has to evolve, and all those will help kind of accelerate the whole process of creating good startups. But the primary reason, right? The primary reason, like the kind of the good startups don't happen is because of a product that is not connecting to the market. Right? That is the biggest problem. I mean, there are no good products. A good product is essentially a product that is serving a need in the market, a need that is large enough, need that is big and painful enough that people will pay for it, right? And you're doing it well. You're solving the problem very, very well, much better than all other alternatives in the market. At the very, it's common sense. I know it's very, very hard, but that's quite simply the problem, right? I mean, if you look at the right problem and you solve it and solve it well, you will do well. And so at the end of the day, good products, good startups don't happen because we don't have good products. We don't think of good products. Now, so let's look at what makes a good product, and then a little bit we look at like what are some of the steps when somebody wants to start to create a good product startup, and then briefly in the end we'll look at some of the traits of a good entrepreneur. Now, how did these products become great? Right? Some products, some of these we recognize, some we don't. Like say when Apple came with their iPod, right? I'm not sure how many of you know iPod. When Apple came with iPod, there were tons of MP3 players. And still, in a space which is very, very well addressed, they came and created a market, right? For a device out of nowhere. They came and they were all MP3 players on one side, and there was Apple iPod on the other side. Now, it was a fantastic product. Just one simple innovation, right? They had this whole jog dial. When you're dealing with music, instead of fumbling with buttons and touch screen and such, they had a jog dial. It was a very simple device. And the jog dial, which I could rotate and it had clicks, there was a need. People needed to listen to music. They said when you listen to music, music is already a very pleasurable activity. Now you want a device that looks very nice, very cute. They said it should look very, very good design-wise, right? And they said it should be very, very usable. Right? When you listen to music, you keep changing often, right? So there's a simple single button. Instead of having multiple buttons to begin with, everything was in one single jog dial. And that way the jog dial feels, that's a pleasure. When anybody that uses the product, you can't but be super impressed. The wow factor, right? A good product has a wow factor. Once I use the product, I love it so much that I will tell everybody I know, you know what, I got this fantastic music player. It's called iPod. And you just have to play with it, right? Now, when we see such an impressive product where we're so impressed that we kind of tell everybody, that's the wow factor. That is the trait of a successful product. It's so good that your customers become your salespeople, right? They are telling others and others come and buy the product. Now, how do the products become great? Like when Uber came in, they were taxi services. How did Uber capture the market? Right? Uber was not, it's not like there was no solution to going from one place to another place. There are tons of solutions. If you wanted a cab, you wanted a car to take you, not your car, there were solutions already. And still Uber came and created a market that didn't exist, almost, right? They were not the first one to do mobile app-based taxi booking. They were not the first one to do taxi aggregation. There were other solutions that came before them, which were aggregating different taxi providers. So from one app, you can book a taxi from any of the taxi companies. They were not the first one to come up with a map-based taxi booking. All of those existed. And yet, they were the first ones to revolutionize the space. What made them what they are? I wish I could talk to the class, but I'm not sure how to do it. It's such a large class. But the fundamental difference was like, they didn't say like it's very hard to find taxis. It is very expensive taxis today. The drivers are rude. The service is poor, and we will fix it. Right? When you state a problem, that's only half the job. Identifying a problem. How do you fix it? Is the other half. So they came and said like they will aggregate. Right? They said they will find taxis. They will find cars, not taxis. They said if you go to a taxi company, you can't improve. Across the country in the US, taxi companies are bad. Right? Almost nowhere the taxi company is known to be good in service. So you can't take taxi companies and make the service better. You can't make them faster. They will take 40 minutes to come. You can't make them cheaper. They cost what they cost are. You can't make them better in service. You can't make the cars cleaner. Everything is what it is. You can't change it because that's what the system is. So anything you do on top of it, the core remains as bad. And that's where the problem was. Now, if like they said like we have to go find the car from somewhere else. So they said, why can't we find Biden US, pizza delivery, a lot of deliveries, all students do the delivery. Right? Generally they are very sad cars, but students have cars. They said, why not we find decent cars that the students have and they're willing to come 2 to 4 hours a day because they need the money. Like unlike in India, in US, even undergrad students fund a lot of at least their living costs, they fund themselves. That's the general cultural practice there. Now, so they have to work somewhere. Now, they said we will find people with cars that need money and get them to come for a few hours. Nobody has to spend a whole day or 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours a day. 2 hours, 4 hours. They said we will use technology to aggregate all these cars and create a service where when anybody needs a cab, the cab is available. And this is a new technology. Now, that's where they started. So the innovation here was in finding those cars that are not taxis. They created largest taxi company in the world today where not a single car is owned by them. And all the cars that are there are cars that already existed, right? For their own personal purpose. They just convince them saying like, if you're going and doing pizza delivery, you come and be a cab driver for me. I'll give you more money, right? Now, of course, now there are many people that buy cars just to run as an Uber car. But when they started, they were just aggregating cars that already existed. Now, so the problem is there, but problem is only one half of the idea. How do you solve it is another half of the idea, right? So it starts with saying, what is the idea for your product? The problem should be there, and there should also be a way of solving the problem. So that is a summary of your idea, right? When you describe an idea, in a few sentences you describe. And at that level, there should be the problem and solution that is thought of, right? If you go a little deeper, there has to be a problem, right? If there is no problem, no point building a solution. Right? There may be some aspirational products, but problem I'm using it more generically. It can be a need, right? There has to be a need. Even if you're building a fun game, there has to be a need for the fun game. If people are not going to be looking for that game, it doesn't matter how good the game is, they're not going to use it. So there has to be a need. Right? Most solutions are targeting actually a problem. Right? There is something that doesn't work well. There is a pain in some form. Right? So you should be clear what is the problem? Who has the problem? Right? Understanding the problem is the most important thing when you define a startup. Often like the thinking is very, very shallow, and very shallow thinking will not work in the market. If somebody says like, I will come up with a new cab service today, you have to be very clear what the problem is. Right? If you say like there is opportunity for another Uber and Ola, that is not, we already seen like multiple companies like the 3-4 other global companies that came and just barely existed even for some months before they had to shut down. Because Uber and Ola are very, very well established. Now, very hard for a new player to come and become the third player. So you can't say I will do what Uber does, which means you have to find gaps. You have to find gaps in what currently Uber and Ola are doing. And which will not be a broad gap. If you are very specific in for one segment, you should know that this segment has a problem today. And what the problem is, you have to figure out. Now, who has the problem, why there is a problem, what the problem is, how bad the problem is, it should be a pain. If it will be a minor inconvenience, they're not going to do it. Like you said, yes, today taxes is very bad. Taxes take 45 minutes today to come in the US. If Uber said, look, I will make the 45 minutes into 35 minutes, people may not switch, and they're not compelling enough. But if they say that I will make your 45 minutes into 10 minutes, then they will consider. Right? They'll try a couple of times, and if every time it's 10 minutes, then they'll switch completely from other cabs to Uber. So your service has to be, there has to be a pain, and the pain should be big enough. Right? It's not that like if somebody says like your web search is taking 2 seconds now, I'll make the search in like 100 milliseconds. It doesn't make sense because like for the mind to process it takes 1 seconds anyway. So there's no problem. Yes, you make it from 2 seconds to 1/10 of its time to 200 milliseconds. But that's a problem not worth solving. There's no problem as it. Yes, I'd like it faster, but I'm not going to pay for it. 2 seconds is good enough. So there should be a clear thing where they want it solved. It's not a minor inconvenience. But there's a clear thing that they want it solved. You should know what the problem is. Very important is how bad the problem is. Right? Like I said, if the problem is not bad enough, they will not solve it. So there's a representation that's often used when you look at startup products. Like the problem you're going after, right? Is it like an oxygen or aspirin or jewelry? What level of product is it? Like if your product is oxygen, it's very, very critical. If somebody says like I will find a cure for COVID today, they just have to come to the market and they'll get the market. They only have to solve it. It will sell itself because the need is so critical. It's completely unsolved problem. If somebody says like I will find a vaccine for any type of cancer, it will just get sold, right? Because like there's an absolute need for it, a critical need for it, and no solutions at all today. It's a complete greenfield. The first one to solve will pretty much capture the market. So that the need is so critical that completely unsolved, right? And that's the oxygen category of products, which is very, very generally comes from very high research. Right? The IP content in those products is very high. There's the nature of the problem that others often only research can solve those problems. Then there are problems which are aspirin, like I have a headache, I can sleep it off, but then like I have to put up with the pain for 4 or 5 hours. It's not a serious, very serious issue. I know 4 or 5 hours of pain will go away, but I have to deal with 4 or 5 hours of pain. So I take a painkiller. Now that is aspirin. Most startups problems that startups target would be in the aspirin category. It's worth solving because like 4 or 5 hours pain nobody wants to deal with. It's just that like it's not life threatening. It's not that critical, but there is a clear problem. And for some it is more than the other, right? So that is the aspirin category. And jewelry is like, they are nice to have products, right? There's a need for that also. I mean, just because like jewelry doesn't serve any purpose doesn't mean there's no need for it. There's a need for it. People want it. So somebody may want a very exciting racing game, right? If there's a need for it, you can go build it. It's not a problem you're solving. There's no pain there, but there's still a need, right? Just an aspirational leads a luxury need, right? That's another category. Now you need to understand where your problem lies, the problem that you're trying to solve, right? That your product is trying to solve. You need to understand where it is and be very clear about it. And often we look at very minor inconveniences. Look, but my product is better. Just because you're better, it's not going to sell. There should be a need for that better, right? There should be a pain that current solutions have, right? That you're solving. If that pain is not there and it's not big enough, it's not worth solving. If supposing you say like I will start an Uber for school buses, like schools, for schools, like instead of Uber for traffic, I will do Uber for schools. Now, you can't be much better than school buses today. If you tell, look, I mean, school buses are all 30, 40 seater buses, I will send only 8 seaters, like buses, small, very clean, air conditioned buses, mini buses, micro buses. And like, is it such a big problem? Like when I'm sending my kids to school, I'm more comfortable sending them in the school bus because it is run by the school than a third party service. Yes, it will be nice if my kids had an air conditioned car, but that's not a serious problem, right? If the school buses were not safe for whatever reason, and then you come and say, look, I'm going to give you a very safe way of taking your kids to school, then I might consider. Right? There's a problem there. But today, mine are just saying like it's not air conditioned, and like I will say air conditioned cars. That's all the differences. It's not worth it. The delta is so small, and then I lose some of the good things that's already there in the current solution. Because current school buses are run by the school, right? So I trust the school already. I'm sending my kids to the school. The kid is spending there 7-8 hours a day. So I kind of trust the school already. And if the bus is provided by the school, I trust the school to take care of the bus service as well. I mean, my kids will be safe. So for a very minor difference, you will not switch. So you should understand what the pain is, right? And when you look at the pain, you should also understand where the gap is. It's not always that the pain is universal, right? If you take, like, say, Uber for commuters, supposing, right? I'm trying to create a service. It's not that everybody that's going to office will use the service. You have to understand for whom there is a problem, right? The ones that are very, very close to the office, they're not in your target. They can go by bus, they can go in a two-wheeler, they can walk and go. It doesn't matter. The ones that are coming from neighboring towns, you can't Uber anyway, right? You can do only within your city. Now, here within city, what kind of commuters? There are people that go to the office in the morning, come back in the evening. There are people that are on the field, they're going from site to site. Now, you should be safe. If supposing you say like the ones that go site to site cannot use Uber today because it's very unreliable. So I'm starting a new service where I'm only going to target people that are going to multiple locations in every day, right? They are office goers, right? They are working professionals that go to multiple locations. If you find that there is a problem in that segment, that is the segment you target, because the problem will not be for everybody, right? Somebody that's going to office in the morning and coming back in the evening, that problem doesn't exist. That problem exists only for those that are going from multiple locations. So either they have to drive through traffic all day, or they depend on Uber today. It's unreliable. Because sometimes you'll get somebody going to get stuck and you're going to be late for your next meeting if you don't get Uber at that location. Now, supposing you say like you're offering a service where you're solving it somehow, right? How you solve it is a different problem, but you're solving it. Now, that is the target segment. So you should need to understand where the need is. The need will not be universal, right? Need will not be every human being or every citizen of the city or every working professional. It will never be at that level, right? The need will be for a very specific segment, and there's a gap in today's solutions. You need to understand what that segment is and what that gap is, right? That is the gap. That is the unmet need that you will target. It's very important to understand that. If you don't think through and understand that, then it's not going to work. I'll build a product that, yes, it is better than existing products, but the need is not there. Nobody wants that product. Just because you're better, they're not going to buy it, right? There's no need for it. So it's important to understand where that unmet need is. And then, of course, what's your solution? Like I said, stating the problem is only half the job, right? You have to have a solution. If you don't have a solution, it doesn't matter how well you understand the problem, right? How well you understand who has the problem, how well you understand what the gap is, where the unmet need is. That's only the starting point. Very critical starting point, but only a starting point. You need to have a solution that is better than all other alternatives in the market. Just because you understood the problem, that doesn't mean it to solve. You also have to solve it, right? You have to do it better than, if Uber said like, I will just go use existing taxi companies and create a linear app, they would not have worked, because they completely flipped the solution from the current way to a very, very different way of solving it. And they didn't use current taxes. They had a model which involved other cars. And that's how it worked, right? So you need to have a solution. And you need to have something unique, right? Because since it's not an unsolved problem, right? There is a way. Today, if somebody is going from multiple locations and they don't want to drive, they have Uber today. It's just that there are inadequacies. So you need to make sure what is different. How are you different from them? How are you unique? How are you better? How are you creative? Right? And think all of this from customer's viewpoint, not your viewpoint. You might say like, I've got the best possible technology in my product. It doesn't matter. The customer doesn't see it. Customer sees, actually from what the customer sees or experiences. If you say like the Uber app is extremely buggy, it keeps crashing. I have a solution, where my app is rock solid. Then yes, it should be something that the customer, there is a problem and you're solving for the customer. And the way customer looks at how you're solving, they should see how you're different, how you're better, how you stand out, how you're unique, right, compared to the others. Because they have alternatives. Because any problem you go after, there are some solutions today. And like, if you're doing different and better, it should be very, very evident. If it's not there, if there's nothing unique from customer's viewpoint, they're not going to consider your product. If it's only marginally better, they're not going to consider. Like, it has to be significantly better. It has to stand out, right? Uniqueness is also not some marginal unique. It's significantly. Uniqueness means it's significantly different and better. So that is very important. So the opportunity essentially, what the customer wants, what others don't do well enough, and what you do well, right? That intersection, the question mark on this slide, that is your sweet spot. That is your opportunity. right? So you have to be different and better than your competition in an area which customers are looking for a solution. Right? That intersection is where the opportunity is. And it has to be competitive. Right? It's not just that it's better in all respects, right? It should be better, it should work well, it should be reliable, it should be affordable. Like if Uber says like, I will get your cab in 1/5 of the time, but it will cost you twice as much. Would anybody go for it? Mostly they won't. Some people might. Most won't go with their solution. So it has to be competitive in all respects, in its features, in its capability, in its reliability, in its cost, right? Only then they're going to, so it has to be competitive because you're going to position yourself against other alternatives. If you say like I'm 20% faster, but 50% expensive, you're not competitive. Yes, on one dimension you're better, on the other dimension you're not. If you say like same price, but I'm 50% faster, maybe it will work. So it has to be on the whole competitive. So the customer is going to evaluate your option with other existing options. And if they're going to move from existing option to your option, then your option has to be significantly better. Right? Not just marginally better, because they're going to switch. There's an incumbent solution that they're used to something. If they're going to switch from that to your product has to be much, much better. So you have to be competitive. And it's very important to understand who your customer is. Right? You can't say every commuter is my customer, or every citizen is my customer, or every working professional is my customer, or every student is my customer. Many startups say that actually. Right? That basically means you haven't understood who your customers are. Customers are those that badly need your product. And so they'll be narrower. They won't be as broad as saying every citizen or every student or every professional. It'll be narrower than that. And it's important to understand who that customer is. There'll be a specific segment, there'll be a group, a type of user, right? And there may be a group of users, right, of a certain type. So you need to understand who your customer is, and you need to understand how to get to them, right? It's not enough to understand that these are my customers. You need to understand where they are and how to get to them, right? You can't say like, if you say like anybody in the age of 22 to 24 is my customer, that's not exactly a customer at all, right? You should be able to figure out who are those, and there should be a segment that you know how to get to them. There should be a channel to them. If you say like my customers are those that are interested in music, okay, that's very good. Young people that are learning music is my target for my service. Supposing that you have some kind of a music teaching service. Now, young professionals learning music is a fantastic target, but where are they? Now, if you say like, okay, there are these music clubs, there are these music groups, whatever, there should be some, you should know that they exist. These people that are new to music and learning music exist in these groups. And these are, there's a social media group, there's a WhatsApp group, there's a Facebook group. Those are the groups and they exist in each city. There are the music clubs, and that's how I'm going to get to them. So that's a segment, right? You should know who the customers are. You should have a channel to get to the customer. And most importantly, you should have an experience when you reach the customer. Why will they consider? Like in terms of, you should be telling them, look, you should consume my product because it is so good. And it's good in this way. And it's better than everything else you're used to. So there should be the segments, there should be channels to the segments, and there should be an experience that you're giving the customer. That is the process of getting the customer, right? It's not enough to know who they are. It's not enough to have a channel. You should know who they are, where they are. You should have a channel to them, and you should have something. Once you get to them, you should have an experience you're offering them that is so compelling they will consider your product. In the end, it has to be viable, right? It has to be like profitable for you, right? It should be like economically usable for the customer, and it should be profitable for you. So, right, you can't say like I will offer this fantastic product, but on every customer I'm going to lose $100. You can afford it for some time, citing it as a marketing cost, but eventually you can't afford to keep losing it. Then as a business, it's not a business at all. So it has to be viable, however you do it. So the great products are essentially, like I said, the wow. When iPod came, Apple came with iPod. The wow factor was like it was so different and better than other MP3 players. Like there are many MP3 players that are very tiny and all that, but this stood out. When its form factor, its style, its functioning, its music experience, its interface, the jog dial, its screen, everything was different from what is in the market. It was highly desirable, right? So there is a need for that level of product. Like the market desirability is there. It's technically feasible. I'm not just doing it on paper. I can actually technically I can build it, right? And then it is economically viable. I can build it in a way and sell it at a price that I can make money. Right? That intersection is the innovation. Right? We're not talking about a piece of art here. Right? And innovation always has a utility in the market. A product that's based on innovation can do well in the market. So that intersection of desirability, feasibility, and viability, like a very desirable space where there's a solution that is desired, highly desired by the users. You have a way of doing it, it's feasible, and you can do it in a way that it is economically profitable also. And that's what makes a great product. Now, how do you build this? Where to start? Let me just try to wrap up in 5 minutes. So where do you start? How do you build a great product? Right. The first thing is to look at the right product before the complete product. And right product is basically for who you're selling at that point. Like you may have a broader vision for your product and market, but that's not where you can start. You can start with there may be some specific segment or a sub-segment or a group. For whatever reasons, you're going to start there. Either they have the most compelling need or that's a group you have very good access. Now, if that's where you're going to start, you have to build the product for that group. So that's the right product, meaning right for your current business requirement. You don't say like, until I build all the bells and whistles in my product, I'm not going to sell. You build what is required to sell to that group that you're initially targeting. That is the right product. Focus on that. And things that there may be things that this customer could use also, but they don't necessarily need to start using your product. Right? You start with that core set that's absolutely necessary for the customer to use. And then you build all the other things around it. So the right product is very important. In any given point, you understand who you're building for and you build what is absolutely minimally necessary to win the customer. That should be the focus. That's the right product. And then you complete the product later. There's no rush. If you try to build the complete product, the market will go past. Like you will have a fantastic product 2 years from now, but then there's no market. Somebody has already taken the market. So you can't let the market go by. You should be very agile and quick to the market. So understanding what is right is very, very important before looking at the complete product. The product value proposition has to be very, very clear. I can't emphasize enough, right? You should understand, and it will not be for anybody and everybody. It will be for a specific segment. It's important to understand who your target segment are, why are they using your product, what is the problem, and how are you better. And that should constantly be at the back of your mind, because at every choice, whether it is a product UI design or its product functionality, product capability, product interface, anything, right? As you think through the product capabilities, you need to understand, keep the value proposition always at the back of your mind. And it's important to be, and then you build for that value proposition so that you can be sure it's not getting lost. It's not enough for you to think that this is required, this is the value customers want, and this is what I think they need. You should do that first exercise, but then you also run it by customers. You have to validate, right? You have to talk to customers and get the feedback. When you get the feedback, it's not enough to ask, do you like it? They'll always say it's nice. You should ask, would you use it? Is something that you would use, or it's something that you could use? Could use is a very, very low probability. Would use is higher probability, right? You should ask them like, how bad is it? Will you definitely use it? Will you pay for it? Now, most of them may be nice and they'll give softer answers, but then you push hard, you'll get the answer you want. But you should understand when you ask, but still ask customers, get the feedback. Don't build and assume that they want it. You think they want it, you defined it. Before you build it, make sure you got some feedback. Even after you build it, as you're building it, keep getting feedback. And it's very important to make sure the connect with the customer is always there. When you build the product, it's important to understand what I should not do. Very, very important. If you understand your target market, the customers, their need, their environment, and the value you're bringing in, and keep that always in sharp focus in your mind, you'll make sure you don't end up doing things that is not required. If all the customer wants is a tire, right, swing, no point building something very, very elaborate with a ladder, and then you climb the ladder and go, there's a sofa at the top. They didn't want all that. You end up building something, they may be okay with it, right? There's a sofa at a much higher height, and there are 3 steps to climb and get to the sofa, and the sofa is a swing. They may be okay with it, but that's not what they wanted. They would have been as happy had you given them just a tire, because instead of taking like 5 months to build the sofa swing, you could have built the tire swing in like 5 hours. They would have been much happier because you gave them exactly what they wanted and gave it to them very, very fast. So it's important to understand what not to build, right? We shouldn't have assumptions that are wrong, that are not connected to the market, right? And then we're wasting precious resources doing something that is not required. So it's very important to be aware of like what I should not do. Very, very important. And of course, the team is the key, right? If you don't have the right people, you can't build anything. Small teams, yes, but the right team, right? It should be a kick-ass team, crack team, very, very smart, right? And bring the right skills that you need. It's not that everybody has to be like smartest programmers or like the highest IQ, or it's not that. They bring the right value to the team, right? If you need somebody that understands the transportation space, you need to have somebody who understands transportation space. You're building a technology product, you need to have people that understand the technology that you're going to be using. So you need to have the right team, and remember, you don't have the luxury of hiring a lot of people. You may not have the luxury of hiring anybody in the early days. It's just the founding team, right? Between the founding team and the very, very few that you can initially hire, you must make sure you have the right team, right people in your team. And that is key to be able to build a right product. So these are some of the some of the principles, right, behind building great products in terms of how you build a great product. Right? Just to conclude, what makes a great entrepreneur? See, at the end of the day, while entrepreneur is a member of the team, entrepreneur also is the captain of the ship, right? It is entrepreneur's vision. It is their understanding of the problem, their connect with the problem, right? Their passion for the problem or solving the problem that keeps the startup going. Very, very important, right? Entrepreneur is not an employee of the company. An employee of the company can leave, even if the first employee, that person can still leave. An entrepreneur cannot leave. I mean, it's not an employee. It's his or her own company. Now, so they should be highly motivated, right? And the motivation come maybe normally they may be very, very laid back, but there's this problem that excites them, right? They're highly motivated to solve it. That's very important. That motivation is very, very important. They should be creative. Creativity doesn't mean I can do art. Creativity is in the whole thinking process, right? They should be very creative in their thinking. They have to be creative. They have to be persuasive. Whether it's to convince a friend to come on as a co-founder or convince somebody to come on as an employee, convince somebody to partner with you, you have to be persuasive. And often persuasion can be very effective just because of your conviction. You're so passionate about your idea that when you talk about your idea, you come across with a lot of conviction. That alone can be persuasive, but often you have to have, right? Like you have to be persuasive, even if it is backed, comes naturally because you're passionate about something. You have to have a vision, right? As a startup, while you may be building something today for the next 2-3 months to get some initial customers on, but you have to have a vision. Where do you want to be 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line? You have to have a vision for the company. You have to have a vision for your products. And even if that's not what you build today, but that vision is something that should be bigger than what you can do today, right? And then like after you capture the initial market, you'll keep expanding and you have a vision, clear vision on where you want to go with the product and company. That's very important. You should be flexible, right? You should be versatile. You have to have a lot of capabilities. An entrepreneur is always a multitasker. I have to think of strategy and I have to also go buy coffee powder for the coffee machine. So you have to think of it on both and everything in between. An entrepreneur should be able to go sell, should be able to go talk to investors, should be able to go build your product, should be able to go kind of work with the designer and design your product interfaces. It should be very, very versatile. Not that they have to be good at everything, but they have to be versatile. They can't say, look, I'm a programmer, all I will do is coding and let somebody else do other stuff. Then that person is not an entrepreneur. Yes, they may spend most of the time coding, but they have to be prepared to do other things, whatever it takes. At the end of the day, they're running a company. They're starting a company and running a company, and they are the captain of the ship. Whatever it takes, they should be willing to do. So they need that versatility. Risk is there will be bad days, and there'll be very bad days, right? So as an entrepreneur, you should be willing to see through those bad days, right? Don't give up. It's very important to have the risk tolerance. Like I know it is bad, but let me give it some more time. You should have the risk tolerance and then it will eventually turn out most likely. But you can't give up too early. Then that's not the trait of an entrepreneur. You should have the risk tolerance. You should be decisive. Like you should make decisions. Right or wrong, you should make decisions. You can't be just vacillating. Shall I do it? Shall I not do it? Should I do this way? Should I do that way? Then nothing will happen. It becomes like analysis paralysis. You keep on analyzing and nothing happens. And as an entrepreneur, you have to be collaborative. In the early days, for sure, because you're such a small team, you have to work with others, take help from others. But there's a good trait even as you grow. As an organization, you can collaborate at a different scale. So being collaborative is always good. If I can avoid doing something and still benefit and let somebody else do some part of what I need to do, that's an effective collaboration. Like I'm still not losing my core value, but something else that I need outside my core value, I'm getting somebody else to do for me. And there's a win-win. That collaboration is all about win-win. I benefit, the partner also benefits. So they need to be very naturally collaborative. They should be constantly able to think of what's a win-win value. Who can help me? How can I help somebody? Mutually, how can we help each other? Right? So they should be very, very collaborative. So that's the. So I can take some questions now. I'm sorry if I rushed a little bit in the end, but I just want to give some time for the questions.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful discussion. Here are some questions which I have curated, was provided by the audience. Uh,
Go ahead.
Strategies to follow when we are deciding to start up a company in science field. What should be the strategies
What should be the strategy for?
when we are deciding to start up a company in science field? Is there any different strategies?
For science?
Yeah, for science fields.
Not really. So science has some amount of experimentation, maybe. So you need to give some time. So before you decide to do a startup, this like your science has to be validated. If I'm basing it on some research work, that research work has to be validated in the lab. You should know that it works. Then your startup cannot be about the research. Your startup is taking the research forward as a product into the market. So that's the only thing to be aware of when it comes to science. Before you decide that it's going to be a startup, you need to make sure the science behind it is understood and working. And then you decide to make a business out of it. But once that science is validated in the lab or before you decide to do a startup, from that point on, it's no different from any other startup.
Okay, and so how can we combine social service and startup?
Why should you combine? I mean, like, so if I want, one thing to keep in mind is like, even if you're doing a not for profit business, they say like your not for profit business has to be profitable. That's how it can sustain and scale. Profit is not the motive, but if they can deliver the service in a way that the service pays for itself, and at the end of it, it also leaves a little bit of profit on the table. Now that is the model that can scale, even if they're looking at a not for profit social enterprise. Right? They call social enterprises. Right? They can generate revenue. And then there are hardcore social initiatives where there is no revenue at all. Those are called NGOs. That they depend on grants because they don't have in their what they are doing, nobody will pay. There's no way to make money out of it. So they will depend on grants. They are called NGOs. As a social startup, profit is not the motive. Profit may be the motive also, but there's a social outcome happening because of what they do. Somebody can be doing like high quality education for grassroots, like low income schools. And they may be doing it in a way that even with a small amount that they can pay, they are profitable. And profit may be the motive, but in that process, they're creating a social impact. They're creating an avenue for quality education to very, very low income families. So profit is motive or not motive doesn't matter, but if you can deliver a social value in a way that you leave some money, the service pays for itself is very important.
And so how can we create a common vision within a team?
No, that is a, see, there is first thing that they have to be compatible, right? The founders especially, it's like a marriage. They have to be compatible, founders, right? Your initial team also has to be very, very compatible, but there is still you can still afford some amount of discordance there if they're hired team. But founders have to be completely compatible. Compatible doesn't mean like they're all identical. They all should be able to work very well with each other, understand each other well, right? And then be able to discuss, have constructive discussions, and arrive at a decision quickly. So those kind of dynamics have to exist. And so that's so common. If that dynamics is there, the common vision will happen.
Yeah.
If the dynamics don't exist, they're all constantly fighting each other. They probably can never get a common vision, and the startup will not even be successful.
Hmm. So have you ever thought of quitting your biggest project because nothing was going as planned?
Have you thought of sorry what?
Quitting your biggest project because nothing was going as planned, or how you felt motivated?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think I've come close to quitting, anywhere close to quitting, thankfully, so far. But I mean, there will be bad days, there'll be bad weeks, sometimes bad months, right? It can go for like nothing is working. You will hit those phases. I think it's a self motivation is always very, very hard. I think having a team helps, having mentors help. That if you have sometimes the team may be very young, and like you talk to somebody else, and somebody with more experience might tell you, look, it's okay, it's bad, but just give it a couple of weeks, it will definitely pass,
Yeah.
right? So you need to have those, but then often your passion alone might see it through, right? If you're very passionate about what you're doing, you'll say, look, I'm not going to give up. But these are some things. A good team helps. Having some good advisors and mentors help. And of course, passion always helps.
So how you dealt with multiple marketing problems which occur at the same time?
The first thing I haven't sold ever. I've always been working for academic institutions or like volunteer organizations. I don't have to sell much per se, right? It is my nature of activity is very, very different. But if there are multiple, see, how does marketing failure differ from some other failure? Like a difficulty is a difficulty.
Yeah.
Like there's no difference. Whether it's a marketing difficulty or a technical difficulty or a team difficulty or like funding difficulty, a difficulty is difficulty. You just have to deal with it. So it's no different. The nature of difficulty is not going to make it any easier or any harder. When you have a difficulty, you have to deal with it and solve it.
Then, sir, how to overcome successfully on your fear to start a company?
How to overcome successfully?
The fear to start a company, the problems which we are going to face ahead, that fear.
I mean, if somebody is afraid to start, they should not start. Right? You start a startup because you're very excited to do it. Why would you be afraid to start? I can understand after 1 year, 2 years, you still haven't got revenue, you haven't been able to raise money. At that time, you're worried. I can understand. If you're afraid to start, then you shouldn't even start. At the starting point, is where you're blissfully ignorant. It's full of optimism. You have an idea that you think is exciting. You have an understanding of the problem that you think exists. You have an understanding of customers that you think there are who will use your product. It's nothing but optimism. Why would you be scared at that point? If somebody is scared, they shouldn't even think of starting up.
Okay. Then someone has asked, like sometimes they feel that efforts will go in vain. In the beginning, is this a feeling it should come or we can go through it?
No, you should understand that like at the end of the day, you're doing something and you're doing something within your capability limits. And in many cases, you might be doing something that is also within your professional realm also, right? If it's not like somebody is done engineering and then they're going to do something entirely unrelated to engineering, right? You might in some form be also in your domain in most cases. Even if you're not in your domain, you're going to be doing something for a year, year and a half with lots of passion. Your understanding as an experience is going to be extremely rich experience, like much, much richer than what it would be had you been working for some company for the same year. So even if you give up, it is on your resume as an experience profile. It is very, very rich experience. And it's like switching a job. You are doing something else. You decide to do your startup. At the end of it, if you shut down, you're going to go back to another job. So, and when you go back to another job, the fact that you've done a startup, I think that experience is much more valuable than what it might have been had you been working for somebody. For a couple of reasons. One, there's passion, right? And you've done things that very few try to do. Not many go and start a company. So that experience is very unique. Not many have that experience. And you've done that because you're very passionate, which means you put a lot of effort and high quality effort. Because when you're passionate, you're going to put very, very high quality. It's not just about spending 10, 12 hours a day. It's going to be very high quality effort because you're passionate about it. And because you're passionate, you're going to learn so much. It's a much, much richer experience. Even if you just try to look at it, somebody is doing an engineering student has done an engineering startup. Even just from technology standpoint, they're going to have done much, much more than what anybody else would have done. And on top of it, they have the whole experience of building a company, even if it failed. They will be better off for sure, not worse off.
Yeah. So then now anyone wants to ask you some question. 22, Badruddin, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. There is a simple question that I want to ask. I am very, very passionate about starting a company. I really love to start a company, but I'm also afraid things may not go on well. Capital to start a company is not readily available. So I'm looking at falling on some loans to be able to start a company. Do you advise that I fall on that? That is number one. Number two, you just said that when you are afraid, you don't start a company. But somebody also said that avoid the risk and avoid the benefits. How do we put those things together, sir? Thank you, sir.
See, the first one, should you take a loan? It depends, right? Ideally, no. As a founding team, your sweat equity, what is called sweat equity, like your time and effort is investment. You just don't take salary. Right? So you don't need, initially the founding team should do all the work. Now, if you might be in a space where you need material, right? Then yes, you need money. It's not just your time. For your time, if it's a pure software product, for instance, your time doesn't involve any money. It's investment in kind. You're just foregoing your salary, but you don't have to pay anybody anything. So you don't need money. Right? And if your basic expenses are taken care of, however you're taking care of it, then it's your time is investment. Sometimes you may need to buy some equipment if it's a hardware product and such. Then of course you need some money. Ideally, you should be from your own money. You should not take a loan that early. So loans can come later, not very early. At the beginning, ideally there should not be loans. It should be your own savings and such that you put in, and it can't be loans, because loans is some level easy money. Even investors won't look kindly to it, or even customers may not look kindly to it. Say that the company seems on very shaky ground because you started off itself with a loan. So loans is not a good thing in the early days, for sure. And this thing is it's a common problem, right? I mean, no risk, no reward. So startup is a high risk business. It will fail. So mentally be prepared. It's okay. I'm going to give it my best shot for 18 months. If it doesn't work out, I will shut down. Right? But 18 months, I'm giving it everything I have. I won't quit before 18 months. I mean, both my kids chose entrepreneurial path. Though I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm in the startup space for a very long time, but I'm not an entrepreneur myself. Sorry. I told them I want them to do masters, and both chose to do a startup without doing masters. So I told them, look, I want you to give it 2 years. I will treat it as masters. They cannot quit for 2 years. That's the only condition. I have given them, that they can't quit for 2 years. And I said, I will treat it as master because that is rich learning. And I said, however hard it is, you can't quit for 2 years. That's all I told them. Now, so set yourself some time. It could be 12 months, not very short, because it takes time to build these businesses and validate in the market. 12 to 18 months, preferably 18 to 24 months, right? 18 months at least you may need for most businesses to validate in the market. At that point, you can decide, okay, it's not at all working out, you can quit. It's working but not working well enough, then you can decide do you want to continue or not. Because sometimes it might be okay, right? If it is doing well enough and it's getting you at least as much income as you might get had you been working for a company and you're able to employ a few people, some people may choose to continue. Some might say, look, if it's just that, I don't want to do a startup because I will just go work for a company. We can decide at that point. If it's not working, you quit. If it's working very, very well, you continue. Something in between, you decide whether to quit or not. But you should give it some time. 18 months, 15 months. Sometime you say, like, I'm going to give it everything I have before I evaluate.
Just to add on to what Ramesh said, Badruddin, I know, sweat equity is what you put in to get your prototype ready, but give them a set aside funds for a gap or seed fund, we call it. So for you to help build the prototype, we will help you with that. Initially, and it's not for all, depending on your commitment and what your product is and what your startup idea is, that funding is there. And then for you, we will also set up wherein we'll invite venture capitalists out to our university, and you can pitch into them. And as Ramesh said, pitch in, and if they like your product, you will be able to generate funding through that source as well. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, sir.
So probably we have time, Neha, with one more question, maybe.
Yes.
Is there anyone to ask any questions? You can raise your hand. Yeah, there is one more.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Anik. I have a question that's, let's say we have a solution for a problem that is going to be severe in a few years. Let's say pollution, okay? And people are kind of aware of it, but not that serious because they're not that directly affected by that. How do you propose to market that and use that in present?
No, it's not enough. If not enough, if you believe it's a problem, right? It may be really a problem and you believe it's a problem, but that doesn't matter. If your users don't believe it's a problem, it doesn't matter whether you solve it or not, right? So you should understand for whom is it a problem. Is it people that are asthmatic and have some lung issues? For them, pollution is a serious problem. Like to them, if you say like, okay, I'm coming up with a solution where I will have an app on your phone, you subscribe to my service, and I will tell you when pollution levels are high in your area. Now, if you build such a solution, everybody won't buy it. But the ones that have a problem will buy it. And just because you think everybody should understand pollution and it's good that pollution is low, they won't buy your product. So you should understand for whom they should believe it's a problem for them, not you. You believing is not enough. They should believe that there's a problem. And if there are such people, then it's worth solving. If there, such people don't exist, then it's not worth solving.
All right. Thank you for that.
So
Good afternoon.
time. So thank you so much. It was fantastic. So thanks to Leban. It's a pleasure and nice to see such a large group, almost 170 students. It's nice to talk to such a large group. I hope the talk and the interaction has helped in some form, stimulate and kind of in some form inspire. Hopefully, happy to anybody that has an idea and want a sounding board. Happy to be the sounding board. So thank you so much, Leban, for this.
Thanks, Ramesh. Thank you. I take great pleasure. And Neha, you want to close it, wrap it up, and want to thank?
Yes, sir. I take the privilege to propose the vote of thanks for today's illuminating and informative webinar. I would like to thank our guest, Professor Ramesh Loganathan, for visiting us and enlightening us with his knowledge and wisdom. It gave deep insight into the topic traits of successful entrepreneur. I am pretty sure the precious knowledge that he gave us today will definitely help us in the future startups. I thank all the attendees from the Geetam who invested their time in this despite of having a busy curriculum. I hope you take away a lot from your speaker and are leaving this meeting with a clear goal this time. I extend my thanks to all club members who worked extensively and made this event a success. Team E Club wishes you a great success and hope one day you are able to build your dream startup.